Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Join this week for a debate on masking with the former state representative, current treasurer of the city of St. Louis, Tishaura Jones. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Kevin Engler, former state senator, now the county clerk down in St. Francois County, correct?
That's right.
All right, let's just start off the top. We are not going to talk about is I have a mask, or the mask, do they help, do they hurt? My assumption is they probably don't hurt and they might help. The question I want to talk to you guys about is former legislators, now you're folks that actually enact these laws on a local level. Should governments actually force people to wear a mask, not just encourage them, but force? Kevin Engler, you just went through an interesting week in St. Francis County where they enacted a mask ordinance or mandate, whatever you want to call it, in a pretty rural county.
That's right. You asked me to come up and talk about the counties that I represented. Why do they resist this? Why do they not want mandates? And it just happened in St. Francis County. I wear a mask when appropriate in St. Francis County, and businesses that want me to wear a mask. But you can call us country, you can call us redneck, you can call us whatever, but people there resist being forced into it. Our county commissioner, who wears a mask all the time, says he's in favor of the mask, but he did not want to do this when the health department came to the commission last week because he felt mandating it would galvanize the opposition, would cause people to come out completely against it that probably would wear the mask every once in a while now. Well, the only doctor on the health department voted against it because she said it will cause anxiety, it will cause anger, people will. And I remember commenting that day when they came and asked to the commission to back it, and they didn't, and they were going to do it anyway. I said, well, first, you don't have the legal authority. In the counties in our area, they do not have the legal authority with the health departments. When we were in the legislature, we probably would have not liked other boards and things making laws and making fines. We didn't grant them that. So I told them that in the meeting. It didn't seem to affect them. But when they decided to do it anyway, they were going to go, I said, this is going to go over like a pregnant pole vaulter. People are going to hate it. And within days, you know the response. They came out and said, we're not going to do this. It's against our constitutional rights. By gosh, you can't make us do this. It created such a fervor that I just think that it would be the wrong move. And then they backed off there was such a momentum against it that they backed off.
Tishaura Jones, you represent a city where my observation is, I'm a guest in St. Louis when I go there, the majority of the folks there actually want the government to force you to wear masks.
I think people want us to lead by example. And unfortunately in Missouri, we have not been leading by example. We've seen our governor traipsing around the state as he campaigns without a mask. And what's the result? Unfortunately, he and his wife now have COVID. And I think what's important here is that we also have to pay attention to science. You know, years ago when the Federal Transportation Authority said that we should wear seatbelts in cars, because when I grew up, there were no seatbelts. I'm still old enough to remember that there were no seatbelts. When they started to say that this is something that we should do to keep people safe, what did we do? All of the automobiles have seatbelts in them now. We wear seatbelts in order to keep us and other people safe. I think this is about keeping people safe. And study after study have shown that when a majority of people wear masks, then there's a slowdown in the rate of transmission of this disease. So, you know, what is our outcome here? What's our North Star? We want to keep people safe. We want to keep people alive. We want to make sure that they survive for themselves and their children and generations beyond.
Let me ask you the question, though. You served in the legislature. You've met people from all over this state. Is maybe persuading them better to do than mandating them in certain parts of the state? Maybe in St. Louis, where you have maybe just Kansas City, Columbia for sure, where they have a more liberal group. They want more, they take an order from the government very differently than, say, a guy in Madison County, Missouri. Is it not maybe better to lead by example and persuade people rather than have the government force them?
I think I'm on the side of a mandate because we've seen in states where there is a mandate that the disease progression rate or transmission rate has slowed by 2% or more. And this was measured before the mask mandate and after. So before the mask mandate, it was spreading, and then after it started to slow down significantly. I mean, even if 80% of the people wore masks, it would slow down the rate of transmission significantly. So what's our North Star? We're trying to slow down the rate of transmission of this disease.
Okay, let me ask you the question. When I go into Schnucks, Dave Cook from the jump was like, you should wear a mask. Our guys at UFCW, they need it. I wear a mask out of respect. I just get the sense there's a whole group of people and really Butler County, a little bit further down 67, is not that much over the St. Francis County.
No,
Would it not have been better
but
to convince them?
Butler County gets Saturday Night Live on Monday. We get it
Sometimes.
about Sunday, so it takes a little while to get it. But the mandates are different. She mentions cars and the seat belts. A lot of our people don't use them. I think you should. But the speed limits is a good example. We know that you're safer and the other drivers are safer from me if we make the speed limit 50 miles an hour. But we make it 70 because there's a trade-off, and there's a trade-off on this too. I think by demanding you wear a mask, you give people the false sense of security. You put it on, I'll get closer to you. If you keep it off, I stay farther back from you down in and we're spread out a little bit. I understand in parts of St. Louis, but you don't know what that is. On the way up here, I saw a bunch of people driving in the cars by themselves wearing their masks. What is the science behind that? Who are they protecting themselves from, or who are they protecting while they're driving by? So there's got to be reasonable alternatives. And I just agree with your premise earlier that if we encourage it, we show it, because if you're going to have the vast majority of the people in our area against it, and it's unenforceable. The police chief, the sheriff says, I'm not going to send I'm not the mask police.
Yeah.
What it's going to cause is arguments between people saying, you're not wearing your mask, I'm going to call the police. No, you go ahead and call the police. And what they're going to do is referee. We don't need people fighting each other. We need to be people, be respectful of each other, try to keep their distances, try to use the means. We're not going to, I would hope not, have the hand washing police where we make a fine that if the cops come in and see that you didn't wash your hands for 20 seconds because it's the same type of hygiene that will keep us safe. We're not going to do that. We shouldn't do that. We should be reasonable in some of these things. And I think that people would go along with it more until you tell them, by gosh, you're going to do it, or I'm going to fine you and I'm going to arrest you.
Well, we already see the fights. I mean, we've seen them on social media. People that don't want to go into Walmart wearing a mask. People that don't want to go into certain businesses saying they don't want to wear a mask because it's their constitutional right. I'm like, no, when you enter a business, that's someone's private property, and then they can
respect businesses that make you wear a mask. That's what they want to do. Go there or don't.
Right, but we've
business.
seen the fights. You know, they have been challenging these employees, and God bless them, those employees that are on the front line, the essential workers who have to deal with this.
I agree with you.
But you know, we've seen the fights already, and you know, again, we should lead by example.
Well, I agree with that, but we see St. Louis TV where we're at. I mean, we're in their market, and I'm old-fashioned. I still go to church every week, and my church you have to have 2 pews between you. You can't be sitting by somebody. Every week, people are turned away because we don't have room, because COVID must be present in our church. But we turn on the TV and see protests and riots. Like last night, they were trying to light up the front of the police headquarters. They're not wearing masks. Where are the mask police? Why aren't they coming and telling them to socially distance? Why can they do these actions and I can't go to church and people cannot be let into church because we're already maxed out as far as our distance and our mask? There becomes a point where it's unreasonable, and I think when people see that, then it galvanizes them and sets them back and say, I'm not going to do any of this. I don't trust any of this.
But don't you think, though, there's no penalty right now in Farmington if this is enforced in law? If you're walking down the street at Maple Valley or the sidewalk there, the government can't give you a fine for that. They can't give a protester a fine for that, right? It's just, you're talking about media bias.
So
at
it's
that point.
superfluous.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if the vast majority of the people against it in our area, and it's unenforceable, that was the question why you asked me to come up, but why isn't it being enforced and why isn't it being mandated in our area? Those are the 2 examples of why it's not being.
I don't know. I've been involved in several protests since the killing of George Floyd, and everywhere I go, people are wearing masks. You don't hear people catching coronavirus or COVID from going to a protest, but you have heard of people catching COVID from going to indoor rallies, i.e., what's his name?
So they do contact tracing at protests? When they're throwing Molotov cocktails, they're saying, oh, who was by you when you were doing that? Come on.
No, I'm just saying that they were wearing masks, and I haven't heard of anyone who said that they went to a protest and caught COVID.
I got to experience the protest in Jefferson City. Now it was peaceful. There was no harm to downtown. I own a building downtown, a business downtown. It made its point. It was aggressive, but there was no harm to anybody. But now there were not, and it was hot. It was still in the summer. There wasn't, the mass started, and then obviously as people got hot, they came down. I do think there's a media view that's very different from a Donald Trump rally to a protest. The media supports one and hates the other, and I think that's kind of what helps that pushback in places like St. Francois County. That's like there's not an equitable thing here, and I think it's hard to take the media seriously when telling you should wear a mask when they do treat it very differently. People that don't.
That's correct. I think that disparity is one of the things that galvanizes once again the people, the opponents. And it gets on the internet, and then it causes an overreaction. I see now that they want to. Nobody cared about who was on the health department.
You mentioned the politics of this. Governor Parson and the First Lady did test positive for COVID this week. Kevin, you're a pretty practical guy. I think that is not a good thing for the governor 6 weeks out from an election.
Absolutely not. You should be shaking hands and making appearances. Now you can't shake hands. You can't even.
He should never have been shaking hands.
Well, that's my point. Now in this environment, you can't even shake hands, nor can you make appearances. So that puts it behind the elbow.
You can make appearances, but you can be safe about making appearances. I've done the same thing. I just got off of a pretty difficult campaign where there was still in-person events. I was always in a mask. I never shook hands.
So do you wear a glove? Do you not shake hands? What do you do when you?
I don't shake hands. I do a fist bump. I always have my hand sanitizer handy. If someone is insistent on shaking hands, I'll shake it, but I'm right there with my hand sanitizer afterwards. There are precautions that you can take to make sure that you can campaign safely.
I agree with that. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for him campaigning. Totally get it. That does not set aside the balance that he did with imposing the restrictions and the lockdowns. Our economy and a lot of economy around the state of Missouri is going to be, otherwise we'd be laying off thousands of people and cutting
ABC has
budgets.
a time mandate on us. Give me a prediction. What's the governor's race going to end up like?
It's going to be tighter, and Parsons will win.
Give me a number now.
4 points.
Who's going to win this governor's race? By how much?
Nicole Galloway is going to win by 4 points.
4 points? Wow. Tishaura Jones, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Braxton Payne joins us, but first, go to showmissouri.com, the history of Missouri one county at a time. This week, we're in beautiful Lexington, Missouri, Lafayette County, the hometown of General Donovan. Sam Walton spent some time there. Even our current junior senator from the great state of Missouri, Josh Hawley's from there. Showmissouri.com, the history of Missouri one county at a time. We'll be right back after this.
I've always protected and served Missouri, but Jill Shoup has a disturbing pattern of siding with criminals. Shoup defended criminal illegal immigrants and voted against tougher laws for child sex offenders. Now, radical defund the police organizations are backing her. Jill Shoup isn't on our side. Ann Wagner stands with law enforcement, partnering with us to bring dangerous criminals to justice. Ann Wagner will keep Missouri safe.
I'm Ann Wagner. I'm endorsed by our local police and firefighters, and I approve this message.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Braxton Payne with the Kelley Group. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Donna Baringer, former alderwoman in the city of St. Louis, now state rep. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Jim Murphy, the most quotable man in Missouri from South County, St. Louis. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And Mark Dalton with the Carpenters Union. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back.
Mark Dalton, you handicap these races as well as anybody I know, both parties. You can do a primary and a general. The fact of the matter is, with the governor and the first lady getting COVID, there's been a lot of criticism in St. Louis and Kansas City. They want people in Oregon County to wear a mask. They want to wear a mask right now. the governor took the criticism that he's got COVID. Probably a good day for the state auditor.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely.
No one's cheering for it, but still.
Right. It takes him, out of the game and a lot of the stuff he needs to do. So yeah, it definitely helps her out.
Braxton Pages, from a political standpoint, I mean, when you're a Democrat, you essentially campaign. You hit St. Louis, Kansas City, you hit Columbia, Greene County. After that, it's not. A Democrat, to get their vote, doesn't really have to go to Ripley County. When you're a Republican, you have to hit all those counties. You have to. They expect to see you in person in Howell County and Holt County. Hard to do now if you've got COVID. Impossible to do. Plus the PR on it is going to take a hit from the Post and the Star.
Yeah, so one of the things, though, I think Nicole Galloway's doing a great job is she is hitting all those counties. She's going everywhere in the state of Missouri. She's not just saying, well, hey, I have to get Kansas City, I have to get Greene County, I have to get Boone County, I have to get St. Louis. She's going everywhere, and she's making the case. And she's also tying back the coronavirus to healthcare, and I think that's something that's very important. And as we see the first family infected by the coronavirus, which I don't think anybody wants to see, it is going to affect his campaign. Republicans have been campaigning door to door. They have been door knocking. Democrats not so much, doing contactless lit drops. So I think it's going to be important to see the difference in what 2 weeks can really do for the Galloway campaign.
What do? You talked about how this campaign's happening. I know a lot of Democrats, they'll just like hold a sign out in front of your door or something like that. Republicans are knocking on doors, even in St. Louis. I mean, other parts of the state, I don't think they're as worried about it. The impact of this probably, although I'm sure she was never hoping for it, probably ends up being positive for her, right?
Well, the positive part is that in the primary in 2016, we had so many people register to vote. In this election, in the primary, the city of St. Louis had 11,000 people register to vote, and we had 40,000 people vote that didn't vote in 2016. So even though we're not going door to door, what we are is we're getting the people to the polls, and that's all that counts.
Do you think there's a fear, though, from her friend, the Galloway supporters at the Post and the Star, too much schadenfreude over this? I mean, a man is sick and his wife is sick. They're not holding their glee in very well. Do you think you have to worry a little bit about Nicole Galloway's probably best supporters, the ones at the Star and the Post, going too much?
I honestly believe no one thinks this is good that this happened to the governor and his wife. This is actually horrible. But what it does show is that no one is not going to get this, as in you can get it no matter where you go in the state of Missouri. And so when she's out there in all those counties and she is doing what she's doing social distancing, she's wearing a mask, so she's showing that the health care should come first, not the politics.
I don't know, Jim Murphy, the Galloway comms team at the Post and the Star, they seem a little bit less than crestfallen the governor got ill.
Well, it's unfortunate that COVID's become a political issue. It really shouldn't be. It should be a nonpartisan issue. We should all be fighting it, and equally so. As it turns out, the governor came down with it, and in the best environments, in hospitals where people wear all of the protective gear they can possibly can, we still have first responders and doctors and nurses coming down with this. It's a terrible disease that can affect anybody, and it's a shame that the governor, although and Teresa, I pray for them every night. To make a political issue out of this, I think will backfire.
Mark Dalton, politics is everything all the time. That's one thing I think Trump's made. But it's certainly everything all the time, 6 weeks before an election. Kids going back to school, I heard the Corona bros say, oh my God, this is going to be awful. Everyone in St. Louis should stay in their basement for 4, 5, 6 years. But people are going back to school, and the world's not ending. People are going back to the University of Missouri, and what they're finding is the kids are getting the disease and they don't even know it. The world's moving on. I mean, the doomsday predictions have not come true.
Yeah, so we're seeing some of that. I live out in Wentzville, and I know we've had some of our neighbors, their teachers have tested positive, so they were going in person 2 days a week, and now they're kicked back to virtual for a couple of weeks and kind of dealing with it. But yeah, I mean, the whole school, the virtual, the half in person, half virtual, that's a whole fiasco in itself.
I do think, though, there was a lot of folks that predicted major calamity would happen when kids went back to school. I think in most of the state, kids go back to school, and while there's still people getting this virus, it's going to exist, it's not been the awful scenarios that some predicted.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been doomsday, but you also seen most schools are doing hybrid models, so it's not every kid is going back to school all on the same day. So I think that's important. My fear is really for the rural community in Missouri and the low income. They don't have access to broadband or internet or technology. Those kids are the ones getting left behind, and that no one is talking about at a state level or even sometimes at a local level. And I really fear that those kids are going to be affected not only this year and next year, but in 10 years when they're so far behind because of learning.
Donna Baringer, I mean, you look at the University of Missouri, what a great job they've done handling COVID. I mean, the results speak for themselves. But take a kid, when I was growing up, you know, my dad worked, my mom worked. If I didn't go to school, if my grandma couldn't watch me, somebody would take off work. You take off work enough, you don't have work to go to. I mean, it's fine in Chesterfield to just have the nanny watch the kids, but some people live in Charleston, and they don't have those access to those types of things.
Justin, there's people in St. Louis County where it's a single parent family, and the mother may, work at a dentist's office, and she gets paid by the time she's there. So if she has to stay home with her children because they can't go to school, what does she do? She can't collect a paycheck because she's not working. So we have people who are in certain situations where we need to figure out how to help, and that's why I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all on going to school. I really don't. And then I worry about the kids who have attention deficit disorder who can't sit in front of a computer because they just can't. It's that old adage of squirrels, and they can't pay attention. So those are the two things that I'm concerned about.
Jim Murphy, I mean, I've watched St. Louis. They're doing hybrid stuff. In rural Missouri and the Catholic schools, the Archdiocese, they're just going to school, and if you show up late, you're tardy. That's their policy on COVID, and they're doing a lot of precautions. But I think it's coming down to, especially these private schools, if you don't have a COVID liability law, they're having to go way out of their way to try to keep from getting sued, and they probably get sued anyway. What is the state legislature at least discussing some sort of law that would help shield well-intentioned people with COVID?
Well, actually, the governor's been talking about doing a special on it, and we absolutely have to. My daughter is a teacher at Visitation Academy. I certainly don't want her sued by a student who gets COVID.
A ton of states around us have already done it.
Right, and it's time we bring kids back to school. You know, one of the things with COVID is we talk about the science, and what I've pretty much determined is that we don't have medical science on this. We have medical theory because it changes every day. Every time I get a report, today the mask is a bad thing, don't put it on. Next day it's the best thing in the world. One day it's 6 feet, next day it's 10 feet. CDC says now, it might be airborne at greater distances, and then, never mind, we didn't mean to put that out. You know, we've got to find a system that'll work, and the statistics tell us this, that kids under 18 just aren't dying from this. They're having it like the flu. And keeping kids out of school is detrimental to their development. It's denying them their childhood for a lot of cases. And I respect all the parents now that are complaining in St. Louis County over sports. Yesterday I sat and listened to the county council. There was 450 comments. They went on for 2 hours about how bad it is keeping their kids out of school. There's a new group, Let Them Play. In a week they have 13,000 members of their group on Facebook.
Donna Baringer, as a Cole County business owner, we're very proud that you have Cole County roots. You understand rural Missouri more than most folks I know that have the resume that you have. In St. Louis, Mayor Cruzen comes on, and she makes a mask order. She's elected by the people of the city of St. Louis to do those roles and to fill this in. In Cole County, there would be a health board that, frankly, in Butler County, I kind of know the health department exists, but I don't know who's on that board. No, they don't really vote on it. You don't even have, if it's not contested, it's not even on the ballot. Those folks are making decisions that are very controversial in a lot of the smaller counties, and they're not elected by anybody that would really, like a presiding commissioner, be elected. Do you think there may be a time now to change that law and say this decision has to come from your elected commissioners?
Well, I have to tell you that putting the word COVID with politicians kind of bothers me, because COVID is a health issue, and I would like to hear from scientists versus hear what the politicians think. And so I know people are saying, the city, we shut down, we closed our businesses, we all, sheltered in place. And so our numbers, we flatlined and we did what we were supposed to do. Now the areas that do not want to wear the masks and are keeping their business open, their numbers are spiking. So I think when you think about the masks, I kind of put it with smoking. Smoking impacted the health of the people around, not the actual smokers. So if you want to smoke at home, that's fine. But if you're going into an enclosed area where you're going to impact the health of the other people around you, you should be wearing a mask.
Mark Dalton in St. Charles County, Steve Ellen makes his decisions, right? Yep. You elect him, he makes a decision. You like it or not, you don't elect him. Right. In these rural counties, go over Warren County, it'll be some health board. Let's be honest, I'm sure there's a lot of good people on health boards. Most people didn't know who they were or what they did till right now. It seems like something that should be done by the top elected officials, not a kind of obscure board.
Well, yeah, but But then you got to make sure your top elected officials are listening to the health professionals in the area, not doing what's popular for the partisan beliefs on the health issue.
Well, Jim Murphy, don't you just kick them out of office? They're not doing what you want.
Well, no. We shouldn't have unelected officials making decisions on people's livelihoods. Right now, the idea of killing small business as a cure for coronavirus, I firmly disagree with, and I think we need professionals to do it, but we need a consensus of it. Obviously, our professionals today can't even agree on that. When you have rural counties saying, let's be open, you have St. Louis County saying, let's be closed, despite, Sam Page said when it reaches 40, the average number of hospitalizations a day, we have to put new restrictions on. Now it's down to 32, but they haven't come off. So now we're having a situation where nobody, the goalpost keeps moving. We need to set a goal and say, when it reaches this level, this is what we'll do. And that has to be done across the board. You can't have one set of rules for this county and another one for the county next to it. So, yeah, we need to put some sense to this thing.
We've reached the end of our time here with a minute left. Mark Dalton, who won the week?
I think some of the parents in St. Louis County that are able to take their kids to youth sports now won the week.
Yeah, who won the week?
Tony Lake, the superintendent for Lindbergh Schools. He made a decision to let Lindbergh play football in Jefferson County.
They're taking their kids to play football in Jefferson County.
Absolutely.
Who won the week?
My new superhero, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
What a life. What a life.
I would say Missouri State High School volleyball officials. I am one of them. I will be reffing in St. Louis County starting next week. I will be taking my precautions. I have an electronic whistle, so I will be wearing a mask the entire time. And I'm glad that the state outlined certain things that we should do and what we shouldn't do to keep officials safe.
I never ever see competitive volleyball at any level without thinking of Braxton Payne every time. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to say Tom Burcham, an attorney, former state legislator down in St. Francis County. Whatever you think of mask mandates, he's proof one guy gets involved, things can change. Now, instead of the cops giving you a ticket, I guess the health department will give you a ticket in St. Francis County. One guy getting involved, making a difference. I have a lot of regard for Tom Burcham. We hope you'll have some regard for us and see us next week here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, SPIRE, and Sterling Bank.
Guys, thank you so much for watching the show. I want to tell you about a new thing we're offering. It's the Missouri Times Podcast Network. You'll get this show every week. If you want to listen to it in your car, you don't have time to watch it. You'll get our Show in Missouri podcast, History of Missouri, one county at a time. You'll also get our midweek update. Once a week, I throw up the Facebook Live. We talk politics, usually eat a little lunch and discuss politics. You'll get to hear all those things come right to your phone. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Android. Missouri Times Podcast Network. Please join us and subscribe.